stands for Accountability and Responsibility in South's Ecosystems. And I'm going to give you just a very brief overview of how it came to existence. I think, meanwhile, it's pretty well known that dominant tech platforms hold significant power. However, they often evade the responsibility for all the digital harms that they are causing. And this all is disproportionately affecting the countries in the Global South. The harms we're talking about range from violations of digital rights, threats to women's rights, exploitation of gig workers, challenges faced by human rights defenders, spread of disinformation, misinformation, harmful AI practices, non-transparent algorithms, and so on and so on. And in response to these challenges, the ARISE network has emerged from a participatory process over a couple of years and involving around 70 organizations from across Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, and the Middle East and North Africa region. So ARISE network is not only geographically diverse, but also the participating organizations work on a variety of topics, including digital rights, consumers' rights, gig workers' rights, women's rights, disinformation, and basically all the harms that, that exist in the digital world. So today we have a panel that will be exploring how the ARISE network and its collaborative and participatory processes manage to amplify the marginalized voices and contribute to the disrupting the entrenched platform power and strengthen cross-regional advocacy and accountability efforts. So I will start with introducing our panelists. So to my left, we have Shashank Mohan, who is a tech policy professional based in New Delhi. His work focuses on questions of accountability and regulatory design. He has written extensively on data privacy, platform accountability, and the geopolitics of tech governance. Over the past couple of years, Shashank has worked on developing and maintaining community relationships in digital rights around the world, and he believes that a collective voice is required to affect change. He is currently the Associate Director at the Center for Communication Governance at National Law University, Delhi, and a Tech Policy Fellow with the Tech Global Institute. He's a lawyer by profession, but considers his work to be interdisciplinary. Welcome, Shashank. Then in the room, we also have Raina Ghosh, who is a human geographer by training, with a doctorate from Jawaharlal Nehru University. And they serve as manager and senior researcher at the Digital Empowerment Foundation, our host, leading research on digital rights, circular economy, platform accountability, and economic algorithmic governance. Raina also heads the Dev Secretariat for ARISE, the network I just introduced. Their work encompasses grant and proposal writing, building funding partnerships, qualitative research, policy analysis, and designing monitoring and evaluation frameworks to advance digital access and technology for marginalized communities. Welcome, Raina. And finally, we have Aditi joining us online. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here with us. Aditi Agrawal is a research development and grant specialist at Tattle Civic Technologies, applying feminist and disability justice frameworks towards making online spaces and AI tools safe for users at the margins. They have a PhD in anthropology from the University of Illinois, Chicago, and a master's in development studies from IIT Madras. Aditi enjoys working in interdisciplinary teams that design systems and processes centering the goal of greater equity and access for as many folks as possible. So that's our stellar panel for today. So before we start speaking about the ARISE network, maybe let's first take a step back and see how some of the member organizations are generally working, collaborating with others, forming networks, and building communities. And I will start with Shashank. So your organization, the Center for Communication Governance, generates research that helps engage meaningfully in policymaking in India. You participate in public consultations, contribute to parliamentary subcommittees and other consultation groups. So would you say that your impact gets amplified by joining other civil society organizations, being it on a local, national, regional, or global level?
Thanks, Sanka, and thanks, Raina, for inviting me to this panel. Thanks to DF for a wonderful event. I've been thoroughly enjoying myself since morning. And talking about the morning, Sanka, to answer your question in one word, yes. But also taking one word that whoever attended the panel in the morning would have heard the word power being mentioned a lot of times, and I think I want to center my first comment around power. And how do you oppose people who are sort of very powerful that sometimes we have to, fight against, being from civil society. And what we at CCG have been thinking about it, like, we can't do it alone, right? We need to build trust, build solidarity, and build communities, and find a common language that can finally oppose powerful forces that sometimes seem unmovable, right? That's been the ethos behind the work I have been doing for the past couple of years at CCG, finding community and common language across the world, and feeding into our peers their work, sharing our work with them so that we adopt a common approach to some of the most challenging problems our society faces today on the internet. I'll just take 1 minute more and talk about another work that I picked up in the morning from the panel, which is isolation. I think sometimes as researchers, we're just working alone, and I'm sure you felt it, and I know you too, we feel very isolated. I think one magical thing that I have felt while I've helped my organization build communities around the world is not feeling alone, right? When you start talking to colleagues across the world, especially in the global south, about common challenges that you don't know these challenges are common unless you speak to people about them. The challenges that we face as societies across the global south, and then your brain goes like, okay, if these problems are replicated across the region, maybe the solutions can also be replicated across. So I'll stop there. I know that we have plenty to talk about and hopefully get some engagement from the audience as well. But I just wanted to focus on how do we address power together, maybe through community, and how do we address isolation together. So yeah, I'm borrowing from Vandana's brilliant intervention from the morning panel. So yeah, I'll stop there.
Thanks for sharing that. I believe that power is like one of the words that we will be keep hearing over the next day and a half. And also isolation. I think everybody who works as a researcher in the digital rights field has experienced it at some point, so it resonates with a lot of people here. So our next speaker, Raina, who leads the ARISE Secretariat, will actually tell us more about ARISE itself and understanding how this network is organized and structured is also critical to understanding how we actually can sustain this cross-regional solidarity and accountability efforts. So, Raina, over to you.
Thank you, Senka, and thank you for being like a part of this panel. I think it's really important to bring out the issues of the Global South. And the idea of ARISE was really interesting, and although I wanted to just flag it that I was not part of the genesis of ARISE, but I'm like really grateful for being a part of it. And although I'm leading it, but it's like a collective of 3 people who's running the secretariat. And when we mean by secretariat, and that is how I think it's interesting to stress upon the fact that ARISE works mostly as a loose collective, but even to run a loose collective, you need something to anchor on, and that's how the secretariat sort of comes into play, and which is where DF is serving as a secretariat for the last 1 year. So 3 of us are working for that, and it's as Senka was saying, it's a collective of more than 50 plus organizations, and they're very much rooted in the politics and the needs of the global south. So like for Shashank's organization, or Tattle for that matter, there's POV's representation here, and so all of us are together sort of trying to bring together the questions of accountability which are coming from the global south, because I think a lot of times what happens is, I mean, global south becomes like a testing ground of the frameworks and policies of the global north. So that is where I think advocacy groups and collectives like us really sort of are trying to flip the power game in that sense. And I mean, I don't want to use a term loosely of decoloniality, but still, just to bring out questions that are rooted in the global south, and then trying to question global tech, not like, like for example, Meta or other big companies also. So the secretariat sort of works, as I said, in very loosely. It doesn't have like a binding to it that there's a board of director, there's something like that, but has a structure of its own. It has certain working groups, and we keep meeting, and it's not something that it's very regular, but at the same time, we sort of have an understanding-based thing. Like if it's something like a fundraising team or like a decision-making team, we do run it across through the entire collective, and that's how things sort of run. For example, recently we met at Portugal. There was a global gathering kind of thing, and we did have a very longish discussion about how do we really run an organization or a collective like that. So I think these are the things that, I mean, as I said, like this was a running question that the collective sort of encountered again and again, that whether do we have those participatory rules, like for that matter, always having a working group kind of place or meeting on a regular basis or something like that. But we really stressed upon the fact that we don't want those bindings to be there. We want it to be more run like as participatory as possible, and that's the beauty of it. Like for example, when the Nepal, when the government was overthrown, and that kind of a crisis happened, I think all of us came together in terms of joint statements or solidarity statements in a very cross-regional perspective. But we never ever sort of impose anything to dictate like, okay, this is how we need to have a meeting or something like that. So I think that's the free-flowing conversation that sort of helps it to run, as well as, I mean, I'm sure the challenges we do face in terms of bringing people together across diverse time zones and all, but that's the beauty of it. I think, yeah, I mean, more questions on the workings of it I'm happy to talk about, but that's where I want to stop. Yeah.
Running itself organically. Yeah, but it's still good to have, an anchor. And thanks for serving you and the rest of the dev team. Yeah, well, Shashank, you have participated in ARISE like since the very beginning, since its formation. You attended the retreat. So the ARISE community hosted a retreat last year in January in Kenya. So yeah, you also contributed to all the participatory processes, establishing different coordination and governance models. So can you tell us about what makes this process of ARISE like unique in comparison to other similar networks?
I think some of it Raina has already covered, the organic way our group runs. I think that's a big difference from some other groups I'm part of. We're part of a bunch of other Global South coalitions. We're part of global networks as well. I think the fundamental challenge in the digital space is of trust, right? Trust with companies, trust with others. And I think when we met in Kenya, that was one thing I took back from, that I think we could do a lot of trust building within each other, right? And that's why the network carries itself on organically, because we genuinely believe in each other's causes, we genuinely believe we trust each other because we met. So I think the first thing I want to point to the difference from other coalitions is that retreat where all of us met physically, I think, and spent 3 days together, I think made a very big difference. I think in this technology-driven one, and sorry Aditi, I wish you were here with us, but I think just physically meeting each other really energizes you, and when you find people who are working on the same subjects as you, you find that common language, you find that trust. I think that was one critical element. I think, Sanka, also the way you and others from the first consultant group also created a safe space, I think that really mattered. For people who were not in the room, we had a special sort of person who was emceeing the event, and maybe Sanka, you can talk about that. She was an expert communicator, and the way she ensured that safe ecosystems and safe spaces are created, I think went a long way. I think I've not seen that in other networks, for example. And now I want to sort of draw out a story or an example to illustrate my point. I think, when I was having conversations with people from Brazil or from, with people from Kenya about facial identity projects that are running in their countries, I could share learnings that we've had from Aadhaar, for example, right? What worked in our campaigns and what did not work? What can they learn from each other? What can we learn from the way they fought court battles in their countries back in India? Are certain conversations, as we call them, dead, for example, on the Aadhaar subject, right? And how are people looking at facial recognition or gender harassment or misinformation or violent content online? I think these kind of conversations, when we were having with people over dinner or over coffee or over chai, I think really helped us form that trust and that common language, which sort of sustains the network till date. And I would just, again, focus back at saying that because we were just people from the global south, coming back to decolonization, okay, I don't know how to say that word, but you get me. But I think that really played a big role. I think that created a space where we could talk freely. We don't have to over-explain our experiences, right? And we could trust that the other person is understanding where we're coming from. I think that played a really big role. So again, I think focusing back on forming trust that builds solidarity, which builds community, and only community can oppose powerful forces. That's how I'd like to end this bit.
I even took a note of this, centering people at the margins, but the margins keep shifting. So it is a very dynamic setting, no matter if it's like a geopolitical situation or some very local events that can trigger margins to shift. I think that Shashank wanted to add something to your input.
Yeah, I think thanks, Aditi, for bringing up that challenging hierarchies, because that's another theme which makes ARISE, or which made the Kenya retreat different from other groups I'm part of, right? There is a sense of challenging hierarchies even within the group, right? And with a sense of deep curiosity. I think that's the other word I would like to add. So anyone here who's wanting to build community or form groups, I would suggest you make a space that is buildable. So we were people from around the world, and of course there were a number of Indians, and Indians are loud and they want to occupy space and they're comfortable in English language, right? But we have people from the African continent, the Latin American countries, whose first language is not English like us. And so, what we realized after the first day is 10 people were just talking at each other and other people were checking out. So what we did the next day consciously, without anyone prompting us, is the Indians just try to shut up and let the other people at least have silent space, even if they're not saying anything, but at least they're listening, and we can reflect together. So I think, and that's been a feature of ARISE throughout. We've tried to ensure that no one group or no one person occupies the most space. And how language plays a big role in building global communities, and how cultural identity plays a big role as well. So I just wanted to add that.
Thanks for that comment. So Raina and the Secretariat team, they have been working on an ARISE Anthology. So it's, yeah, it's a publication, yeah, which gathers some critical, artistic, and experimental pieces from across geographies in the Global South. So yeah, today at this panel we want to launch the anthology. More about how it came to life and who contributed.
Yeah. So basically this anthology, just to talk about the anthology, it has 12 chapters. And we tried as much as possible to bring that diversity in place. But of course, given the fact that, the Indianness of it and the Indian contributions are a little heavier on the side, because, even within the ARISE collective, the Indian agencies are more in number, Indian organizations are more in number. So we wanted to reach out within ARISE as well as outside ARISE. And the idea was basically when we reached out outside of ARISE, we actually were very categorical in terms of choosing the pieces also, in terms of bringing people from the margins, not really in their voices, but people who really work very closely with these collectives. So we have people from the unions who work with the platform workers. We have people who are working on the topic of accountability with the people who are most marginalized in terms of the daily wages. Like there's a program called the Mahatma Gandhi Narega program, which is the minimum guarantee program in case of India. And all of us are aware of it, the 100 days program. So there are people who are really getting marginalized by not getting access to their basic rights, just for the fact that they don't have the access to digital technologies. So we wanted to bring out stories like this in our book, because when we sort of had that internal churning about what really accountability means, we ran into that problem of we didn't have an answer to it. In fact, we also did an exercise in Portugal when we met, which was basically talking about accountability in your own mother tongue or your own language, or what do you really mean by accountability? Because, you can do this exercise back home and think about this term, and frankly speaking, we at least didn't get any term in that sense. So accountability is not zimmedari at all. It's, in Hindi, it just loosely translates to zimmedari, but it's something more than that. So what exactly it is? So that's how this journey started. And you can just think about it like in different terms, and that's how we wanted it to be more experimental in nature. We have visual chapters there. We have pieces which are more like a book reviews, where people felt that maybe this kind of a book or this kind of a thing made them kind of feel more about the accountability question. We have interesting pieces like people who are working on the dating platforms and how the accountability question gets encountered. Tavishi has worked on from their organization. Vaishali from POV has worked on the feminist understanding of what accountability means. So these are diverse pieces that we tried to bring together. I'm not sure how successful we were. But yeah, you can have a look at it. It's there at the DF stall as well. So thank you. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks for sharing. I also want to ask Arpita if you want to add something, since you were also involved in the ARISE Secretariat, but no pressure.
To me was, I'm also like kind of trying to build a task force. Like I am also like part of the task force, but again, like sometimes when we have a lot of members, we tend to focus on the output more than why we're here, what we're doing. And I think that when you guys were talking about, just like being more connected to the, like focusing more on that and then like building trust, and then that will automatically kind of bring people together. So yeah, I think the Secretariat's focus sometimes tends to become like go more on the side of, how to bring people together. Are people comfortable? Are they getting along with each other? But like, yeah, we do have to, like there are certain different ways of building that trust, and therefore probably it will survive on their own. So yeah, thank you so much for that.
In our daily jobs, we're answering for what success looks like so often. We're so focused on ensuring there's outcomes for funders, there are outputs that draw outcomes. I think because we were not pressured to define success and then measure up to that definition in this group, at least in that strict way, it eased that tension and people could focus on what really matters. And then define that for ourselves first, build that trust, and then move on to, okay, what can outcome look like? Like Raina mentioned, we recently met as a smaller group within to be like, okay, if funders want this and if we need access to that funding, now how can we move trust building to that significant output? So I think if people are forming collectives, it is important for long-term sustainability to build that trust in this way.
I would like to thank all the speakers, and I would also like to thank again DEF for providing the ARISE Secretariat and also for hosting this amazing event.